You do not need better circumstances. You need better command. Every emotion you feel either trains you to lead your life or trains your life to lead you. Anger, fear, doubt, frustration, shame, none of them are your master unless you keep obeying them. Emotional mastery is not suppression. It is control. It is the power to feel everything without surrendering to anything. Control what you feel, and you control what you do. Control what you do, and you control your life. Chapter 1. Stop worshipping your feelings. Let's begin with the truth most people avoid. Your feelings are real, but they are not always right. That matters, because the moment you start treating every emotion like a command, you lose control of your life. You stop leading yourself. You start obeying yourself. And there is a difference. A massive difference. A weak person says, "I feel it, so it must be true." A disciplined person says, "I feel it, so now I examine it." That's the key. Emotional mastery does not begin when you stop feeling. It begins when you stop kneeling. It begins when you stop worshipping every passing emotion as if it were wisdom. It begins when you understand this simple rule: emotions are signals, not commands. Read that again in your mind. Signals, not commands. Fear is a signal. Anger is a signal. Shame is a signal. Frustration is a signal. Insecurity is a signal. But signals are not instructions. They are data. They tell you something is happening. They do not tell you what must happen next. You have a choice. And that is what most people forget. They feel nervous, so they back down. They feel unmotivated, so they delay. They feel rejected, so they close up. They feel offended, so they attack. They feel tired, so they quit. Then they blame the feeling. But the feeling was never the problem. The obedience was the problem. That is why most people live trapped inside emotional loops. They think the emotion made them do it. It did not. They made a decision inside the emotion. They surrendered authority. They handed over the wheel. And then they acted shocked when the car crashed. You cannot live like that. Not if you want peace. Not if you want confidence. Not if you want self-respect. Here is the phrase you need to burn into your mind. Feel it, name it, do not bow to it. Feel it, name it, do not bow to it. That is emotional discipline in one sentence. Because once you bow to every feeling, you become easy to control, easy to manipulate, easy to derail. A rude comment ruins your day. A delay ruins your mood. A bad morning ruins your week. One setback convinces you that your life is broken. That is not emotional depth. That is emotional slavery. Let's make it practical. You sit down to work on something difficult. A project. A business plan. A major decision. A chapter. A presentation. Something important. And the moment you begin, discomfort shows up. Resistance shows up. Uncertainty shows up. You feel overwhelmed. You feel unready. You feel mentally foggy. So what do most people do? They leave. They check their phone. They get coffee. They clean the room. They tell themselves they will do it later when they feel more ready. But later rarely comes. Why? Because readiness is not what they need. Discipline is what they need. It's not about motivation, it's about command. You do not need to feel powerful to act powerfully. You do not need to feel ready to begin. You do not need to feel confident to move. In fact, most important actions in life begin before the emotion catches up. That's the key. The amateur waits for the feeling. The professional trains the feeling. Now think about public speaking. Someone has to present in front of a room. Their heart starts racing. Their palms sweat. Their chest tightens. Their mind says, You're going to embarrass yourself. That feeling is real. But is it truth? Not necessarily. It may simply be activation, pressure, exposure, the nervous system preparing for significance. But because the person worships the feeling, they interpret it as a verdict. I feel scared, so I must not be good at this. Wrong. I feel anxious, so I should avoid this. Wrong again. The fear is a signal, not a command. You have a choice. You can feel the fear and still speak. You can feel the shaking and still continue. You can feel the pressure and still perform. That is how self-trust is built. Not by removing emotion, by refusing to obey it blindly. And the same thing happens in relationships. A tense conversation begins. Your partner says something sharp. You feel irritation rise instantly. Your pride gets activated. Your ego wants to win. Your emotion says, strike back. Defend yourself. Make them feel what you feel. So you react. You interrupt. You escalate. You say the thing you know will hurt. And later, when the damage is done, you say, I was just upset. No. That is not enough. Your feelings explain you. They do not excuse you. That line matters. Because too many people use emotion as a permission slip. They act recklessly and then point to the feeling as if that settles it. It does not. Feeling angry does not justify cruelty. Feeling insecure does not justify withdrawal. Feeling jealous does not justify control. Feeling sad does not justify abandoning your standards. Your feelings explain you. They do not excuse you. Say it again. Your feelings explain you. They do not excuse you. This is where modern thinking has become dangerously soft. People are taught to honor every feeling, validate every impulse, indulge every internal state. And that sounds compassionate. But undisciplined compassion becomes self-destruction. Because not every feeling deserves a throne. Some feelings need to be heard. Some need to be corrected. Some need to be ignored. Some need to be burned through with action. You do not grow by asking every emotion for permission. You grow by developing the strength to hear the emotion without handing it authority. That's the key. Listen carefully. Emotional mastery is not suppression. It is not pretending. It is not numbness. It is not becoming cold. It is becoming sovereign. It is the ability to say, yes, I feel this. No, it will not rule me. That is power. And if you do not develop that power, life will keep exposing you. Every challenge will feel bigger than it is. Every criticism will feel more personal than it is. Every inconvenience will feel more dramatic than it is. Because when emotion is in charge, perspective disappears. Now let's talk about insecurity. A lot of people shrink because of how they feel about themselves in a moment. They walk into a room and suddenly feel less impressive than others. They compare. They tense up. They become self-conscious. Then they start acting smaller. They talk less. They hide more. They overthink everything. They seek approval. Why? Because they turned a feeling into an identity. They did not say, insecurity is present. They said, I am small. That is the mistake. Feelings pass. Identity sticks. And when you confuse the two, you build a prison out of a moment. You have a choice. You can feel insecure and still speak clearly. You can feel doubtful and still stand tall. You can feel out of place and still hold your ground. You don't need their permission. Not to speak. Not to begin. Not to improve. Not to belong in the room. And you do not need emotional certainty to act with strength. That is one of the biggest lies people believe. They think strong people feel strong all the time. No. Strong people often feel the same fear, the same doubt, the same resistance. The difference is they do not worship it. They do not build altars to temporary emotion. They do not stop their lives every time discomfort appears. They feel it, name it, and they do not bow to it. That phrase must become a reflex. When procrastination appears, say it. When panic appears, say it. When insecurity appears, say it. When irritation appears, say it. Feel it, name it, do not bow to it. And here is the behavioral instruction for your life starting now. When you feel something intense, do not move immediately. Pause. Name the emotion with precision. Then ask one question: what action would my disciplined self take here? Not my emotional self. Not my wounded self. Not my impulsive self. My disciplined self. Ask that question every day, and your life will change. Because the person you become is built in the gap between feeling and action. That gap is where power lives. That gap is where self-respect is built. That gap is where emotional mastery begins. So stop worshiping your feelings. Respect them enough to study them. Control them enough to guide them. But never bow to them. Because the moment you confuse emotion with authority, your life becomes reactive, fragile, and externally controlled. But the moment you reclaim your right to choose, everything changes. You stop being dragged by the storm. You become the one who stands inside it. You have a choice. That's the key. Your feelings explain you. They do not excuse you. Feel it, name it, do not bow to it. That is the first law of emotional mastery. You stopped worshiping your feelings. Now you need to weaken their grip even further. And the fastest way to do that is to expose them clearly. Vague emotion controls weak minds. Precise language creates power. Chapter 2. Name the emotion, break the spell. Most people are not losing to emotion. They are losing to confusion. That is the truth. They say they are overwhelmed. But they are not overwhelmed. They are embarrassed, or rejected, or threatened, or ashamed, or afraid of losing control. But because they never slow down long enough to identify the exact emotion, it grows in the dark. It spreads. It takes over the room. Confusion feeds emotion. Clarity weakens it. That is the rule. A vague emotion feels huge. A named emotion becomes manageable. That's the key. When you say, "I feel off," you stay powerless. When you say, "I feel dismissed," now you have something real to work with. When you say, "I feel stressed," that is often too broad. Are you stressed? Or are you rushed? Are you tired? Or are you resentful? Are you anxious? Or are you afraid of judgment? Those are not the same thing. And if you do not know what you are actually feeling, you will keep solving the wrong problem. That is what most people do. They try to escape what they have not even identified. They numb it. They distract from it. They dramatize it. But they do not name it. And what you refuse to name will continue to control you. What you can name, you can tame. Burn that into your mind. What you can name, you can tame. This is not wordplay. This is power. Because the human mind panics most when the threat feels shapeless. Vague emotion becomes total emotion. It starts to color everything. One uncomfortable feeling becomes an entire identity. One reaction becomes a whole day. One hard moment becomes a story about your life. But the moment you label it precisely, the spell begins to break. Not because the feeling disappears instantly, but because now you are conscious. Now you are specific. Now you are in the room with yourself. And you cannot master what you refuse to observe. Let's make it real. You come home after a long day. Your spouse says one small thing. Maybe the tone is slightly wrong. Maybe the timing is bad. Maybe they ask for something simple. and suddenly you snap. Your voice hardens. Your patience disappears. Your energy turns sharp. Then later you say, "I was just stressed." No. That is lazy language. That is emotional blur. What were you really feeling? Disrespected, drained, unappreciated, cornered, overloaded, powerless. There is a difference. And the difference matters. Because if you were tired, the solution might be rest. If you were resentful, the solution might be honesty. If you felt unseen, the solution might be communication. If you felt powerless all day, the solution might be recovering agency. But when you label everything as stress, you learn nothing. And because you learn nothing, you repeat everything. That is why most people do not have an emotion problem. They have an awareness problem. That's the key. They are not out of feelings. They are out of precision. Here is another example. You are in a negotiation, a sales conversation, a salary discussion, a difficult meeting. The other person pushes back. They question your numbers. They challenge your position. Suddenly your body tightens. Your thoughts speed up. Your words disappear. You freeze. And afterward you say, "I got nervous." Maybe. But maybe that is still too vague. Were you nervous? Or were you intimidated? Were you afraid of conflict? Were you afraid of looking stupid? Were you afraid of losing approval? Were you afraid of being exposed? Name it. Because nervous keeps it blurry. But "I was afraid he would think I was incompetent" tells the truth. And truth is where control begins. You have a choice. You can let vague emotion run your behavior, or you can expose it with language. That is emotional adulthood. Children feel and react. Adults feel and identify. Strong adults feel, identify, and choose. That is the sequence. Pause. Label. Locate. Separate. Pause. Label. Locate. Separate. That is your discipline. First, pause. Do not rush to speak. Do not rush to text. Do not rush to defend. Do not rush to eat, spend, blame, or explain. Pause. Create 1 clean inch of space between the feeling and the action. Because without the pause, there is no power. Second, label. Use exact language. Not bad. Not off. Not weird. Use words that cut through fog. Rejected. Embarrassed. Threatened. Jealous. Ashamed. Impatient. Helpless. Lonely. Dismissed. Inferior. Exposed. The more accurate the word, the weaker the spell. Confusion feeds emotion. Clarity weakens it. Third, locate. Where is it in your body? In your chest, your throat, your stomach, your jaw, your shoulders? This matters because emotion is not just mental. It is physical. When you locate it, you stop being abstract. You stop floating in it. You begin observing it. That changes everything. Fourth, separate. Not, "I am angry." Say, "Anger is present." Not, "I am anxious." Say, "Anxiety is visiting." Not, "I am broken." Say, "Shame is active right now." Do you hear the difference? One turns the feeling into identity. The other turns it into experience. That is a massive difference. Identity traps you. Experience passes through you. That's the key. You are not the emotion. You are the witness of the emotion. You are the one who decides what happens next. You have a choice. Say that when the feeling rises. You have a choice. Now let's talk about overeating after stress. This is one of the clearest examples of emotional confusion disguised as habit. A person has a hard day. pressure builds. They feel restless, heavy, agitated. So they reach for food. Not because they are hungry, because they are trying to change state. But again, the critical question is this: what are they actually feeling? Lonely, unrewarded, depleted, bored, union control, self-pitying, avoidant. Most people never ask. They just say, "I was stressed," and then they repeat the cycle. But once the emotion is named, behavior becomes negotiable. If you are lonely, food will not solve that. If you are unappreciated, snacks will not fix that. If you are mentally overloaded, sugar is not the answer. If you feel powerless, numbing yourself will only deepen the problem. What you can name, you can tame. This is why awareness is not soft work. It is hard work, precise work, honest work. It demands that you stop hiding behind broad language and confront the exact truth of your inner state. And that truth may be uncomfortable. You may discover that your anger is actually humiliation, that your procrastination is actually fear of judgment, that your avoidance is actually shame, that your need to control is actually insecurity. Good. That is not bad news. That is useful news. Because you cannot defeat what you refuse to define. And you do not need their permission to tell yourself the truth. Not your boss's permission. Not your partner's permission. Not your parents' permission. Not society's permission. You need courage. That's the key. It is not about emotionality. It is about emotional precision. It is not about reacting. It is about recognizing. It is not about pretending you feel nothing. It is about refusing to stay unconscious while you feel something. So here is the behavioral instruction for this chapter. For the next 7 days, ban vague emotional language from your life. No more, "I'm just off." No more, "I'm in a mood." No more, "I'm stressed," when that is not the full truth. When emotion rises, stop and label it with one exact word. Then say, "This is what is here. This is not who I am." That sentence matters. This is what is here. This is not who I am. Use it in arguments. Use it before meetings. Use it when cravings hit. Use it when shame rises. Use it when you want to run. And once you label it, ask the next question: what does my disciplined self do with this? Not what does my emotional self want. What does my disciplined self do? That is how emotional mastery becomes practical. That is how you stop being hypnotized by your own inner weather. That is how you break the spell. Because vague emotion feels like fate. Named emotion becomes information. And information can be handled. Information can be directed. Information can be used. Confusion feeds emotion. Clarity weakens it. What you can name, you can tame. That is not theory. That is a weapon. Use it. Because if you cannot identify what is happening inside you, then anything can control you. A tone, a look, a memory, a delay, a fear. But when you bring precision to your emotions, you bring discipline to your life. You stop drowning in feeling and start directing it. You stopped worshiping your feelings. Then you learned to name them. Now it is time to make sure they do not rush you into regret. Because control is not only about awareness. It is about timing. Chapter 3. Delay the reaction, keep the power. Most emotional damage does not come from feeling. It comes from speed. That is the truth. People do not destroy relationships because they felt anger. They destroy relationships because they reacted too fast. People do not ruin opportunities because they felt fear. They ruin opportunities because they obeyed fear immediately. People do not sabotage their lives because they had emotion. They sabotage their lives because emotion got there first and discipline got there too late. That's the key. Emotional weakness is often nothing more than speed without control. Fast anger, fast quitting, fast defending, fast spending, fast texting, fast regretting. And if you do not learn to slow that down, your life will become a long trail of avoidable damage. The pause is power. Say it again. The pause is power. Not because the pause is dramatic. Because the pause interrupts the pattern. It creates a gap. And that gap is where your freedom lives. Without the gap, there is no choice. Without the gap, there is only reaction. And reaction is the language of the undisciplined. You have a choice. But only if you stop long enough to use it. Most people never do. Something happens. A comment. A delay. A rejection. A mistake. A disagreement. A wave of shame. A surge of panic. And instantly, they move. They answer. They lash out. They buy. They quit. They post. They confess. They defend. They run. Then later, when the consequences arrive, they act surprised. But the consequences were born in the speed. Not in the situation. In the speed. That is why one undisciplined moment can cost months of repair. One angry text can damage trust. One impulsive purchase can deepen financial stress. One emotional resignation can destroy leverage. One defensive argument can turn a solvable problem into a permanent fracture. One panicked decision can set your whole life back. Do not give permanent consequences to temporary emotion. Burn that phrase into your mind. Do not give permanent consequences to temporary emotion. This is one of the highest forms of self-command. Because emotion is loud. Emotion is urgent. Emotion wants action now. That is how it tricks you. It says, respond now. It says, fix this now. It says, prove yourself now. It says, leave now. It says, buy it now. It says, say it now. But urgency is not always truth. That's the key. Just because the feeling is immediate does not mean the action should be. You have a choice. You can react on schedule with your emotion. Or you can respond on schedule with your discipline. Those are not the same life. Let's make it real. You receive a message that irritates you. Maybe it is disrespectful. Maybe it is dismissive. Maybe it is cold. Your chest tightens. Your jaw hardens. Your mind instantly starts building the perfect response. Sharp. Clean. Cutting. You want to send it. Right now. Because you want relief. Not resolution. That is what people miss. In emotional moments, they are not trying to solve the problem. They are trying to discharge the feeling. And that is why they make things worse. The angry text feels powerful for 10 seconds. Then the consequences arrive. Now the conflict is bigger. Now the tone is worse. Now trust is lower. Now the issue is no longer the issue. The reaction became the issue. All because you could not wait. The pause is power. One breath. 1 minute. One unsent draft. That is sometimes all it takes to save yourself from unnecessary damage. You do not need their permission to pause. You do not need their permission to say, I will answer this later. You do not need their permission to stop yourself from acting stupid in a heated moment. That is maturity. That is control. Now think about money. A bad day hits. You feel deprived, frustrated, unseen, exhausted. So you start browsing, buying, clicking, ordering. Not because you need something. Because you want emotional relief disguised as consumption. That is not about money. It is about impulse. It is not about desire. It is about discipline. That's the key. The impulse purchase is rarely about the object. It is about the state change. You want to feel better fast. You want reward without reflection. You want comfort without consequence. But consequence always comes. Now the item arrives, but the feeling remains. And the account is lighter. And the pattern is stronger. And self-respect drops a little lower. All because you moved too fast. One pause can stop that. Walk away from the screen. Wait 10 minutes. Wait 1 hour. Sleep on it. If you still want it when the emotion settles, then decide with a clear mind. That is power. Now think about quitting. This is where people make some of the biggest mistakes of their lives. They quit jobs, goals, commitments, relationships, and projects not because those things were wrong, but because the emotion of the moment was heavy. They felt discouraged. They felt embarrassed. They felt behind. They felt tired. So they concluded, this must not be for me. Wrong. Temporary emotion is a terrible judge of long-term direction. Do not give permanent consequences to temporary emotion. One hard day is not a final verdict. One awkward attempt is not proof you should stop. One season of slow progress is not evidence that the path is wrong. Sometimes you are not meant to quit. You are meant to recover. Sometimes you are not meant to leave. You are meant to rest. Sometimes you are not meant to abandon the mission. You are meant to endure the mood. That's the key. It is not about discomfort. It is about discipline. Now let's talk about arguments. Most people enter conflict trying to protect ego, not solve problems. That is why they interrupt. That is why they raise the volume. That is why they talk over the truth. That is why they say things they cannot take back. Because in the moment, being right feels more important than being effective. But that is emotional immaturity. You have a choice. You can defend your ego. Or you can defend the relationship. You can win the moment. Or you can protect the future. You can satisfy your pride. Or you can solve the problem. Those are different goals. And if you do not pause long enough to choose, your lower impulse will choose for you. The pause is power. Pause before you answer. Pause before you accuse. Pause before you explain yourself too much. Pause before you turn one issue into 10 years of stored resentment. A disciplined pause can save a marriage. A disciplined pause can save a partnership. A disciplined pause can save a reputation. A disciplined pause can save you from yourself. Now here is the practical tool. Micro-delays. Not dramatic retreats. Not disappearing for weeks. Micro-delays. 1 breath. That is enough to interrupt emotional speed. 1 minute. That is enough to stop an impulsive reply. 1 walk. That is enough to lower intensity and reset perspective. 1 draft unsent. That is enough to protect you from your most emotional version. 1 night before a major decision. That is enough to separate truth from turbulence. Use these. Train these. Build these into your life until they become automatic. Because discipline is not built in grand speeches. It is built in small interruptions. 1 breath. 1 minute. 1 walk. 1 night. That is how you keep your power. And here is the deeper truth. The pause is not weakness. It is not avoidance. It is not passivity. It is command. Weak people think instant reaction is strength. It is not. Anyone can react. Anyone can explode. Anyone can spend. Anyone can quit. Anyone can defend their ego. That takes no mastery. Real strength is measured by restraint. Real strength is measured by timing. Real strength is measured by what you did not do when emotion gave you permission. That's the key. So here is your instruction. For the next 7 days, do not make important decisions in emotional heat. Not by text. Not by email. Not with your wallet. Not with your mouth. Not with your resignation. Not with your pride. When emotion rises, install a delay. Say to yourself, "Not now. I decide after the feeling settles." That line will save you. Write the message, but do not send it. Feel the urge, but do not obey it. Take the walk before the argument. Sleep before the decision. Breathe before the answer. This is how you reclaim command from emotional speed. This is how you stop paying long-term prices for short-term states. Do not give permanent consequences to temporary emotion. The pause is power. You have a choice. Always. But only if you create space long enough to see it. That is the lesson. Emotion wants immediate action. Mastery demands deliberate response. And the person who learns to delay reaction stops being controlled by inner weather and starts controlling outcomes. You do not need to stop emotion. You need to stop rushing behind it. You learn to stop worshiping your feelings. Then you learn to name them. Then you learn to delay them. Now it is time to understand why some emotions hit harder than others. Because a weak body makes a reactive mind. Chapter 4. Train your body or your emotions will win. Most people try to solve emotional problems with mental speeches. They talk to themselves. They analyze themselves. They explain themselves. And sometimes that helps. But not first. Because emotional control is physical before it is philosophical. That is the truth. You cannot live on bad sleep, shallow breathing, constant stimulation, digital overload, caffeine spikes, skipped meals, and chronic tension, then act surprised when your emotions become unstable. A tired body creates a fragile mind. Read that again. A tired body creates a fragile mind. That's the key. Many of your emotional problems are not character problems. They are condition problems. Not all of them, but many. You are not always weak. Sometimes you are depleted. You are not always lost. Sometimes you are overstimulated. You are not always in a deep personal crisis. Sometimes your nervous system is overloaded and begging for recovery. That distinction matters. Because if you misdiagnose exhaustion as identity collapse, you will make terrible decisions. You will say, "I've lost my drive." Maybe not. Maybe you just have not slept properly in 10 days. You will say, "I hate my life." Maybe not. Maybe your mind has been living in constant interruption and zero silence. You will say, "I'm becoming someone I don't recognize." Maybe not. Maybe your body is running on tension, sugar, scrolling, and survival. A tired body creates a fragile mind. That phrase should humble you, because people love to make everything dramatic. They want every emotional dip to mean something profound. They want every hard week to become a crisis of identity. But sometimes the truth is simpler, less glamorous, more physical. You are underslept, underfed, overexposed, overstimulated, under-recovered. And because your body is unstable, your emotions become unstable. That's the key. Your emotions do not float above your physiology. They ride on top of it. So if your body is chaotic, your emotional life will be chaotic. Let's make it real. Think about the last time you were exhausted. Not just a little tired. Exhausted. Your patience dropped. Your tolerance disappeared. Little things felt bigger. Normal requests felt irritating. A minor inconvenience felt personal. You said things you would not normally say. You took tone the wrong way. You became more defensive, more dramatic, more reactive. Why? Because a tired body creates a fragile mind. When the body is drained, discipline gets expensive. Everything costs more. Kindness costs more. Patience costs more. Focus costs more. Perspective costs more. And when perspective gets expensive, emotion becomes cheap and fast. You snap sooner. Assume worse. Think smaller. That is why sleep is not a luxury in emotional mastery. It is infrastructure. It is not about comfort, it is about control. Remember that. It is not about comfort, it is about control. Now think about breathing. Most people breathe like prey. Fast. High in the chest. Shallow. Uneven. Especially under pressure. Then they wonder why their thoughts race. Your breath is not separate from your state. Your breath is your state. If your breathing is frantic, your mind will follow. If your breathing is controlled, your mind can begin to follow that too. Calm is trained in the body before it is proven in the mind. That is not poetry. That is mechanics. When pressure rises, your first job is not to think your way out. Your first job is to breathe your way back into command. Slow inhale. Longer exhale. Again. And again. That is how you interrupt panic before it becomes behavior. You have a choice. You can let the body spiral and drag the mind with it. Or you can use the body to lead the mind back. That's the key. Now let's talk about overstimulation. This is one of the most ignored causes of emotional weakness in modern life. Constant notifications. Constant content. Constant noise. Constant comparison. Constant opinions. Constant access. People spend hours absorbing fear, outrage, envy, performance, news, conflict, trends, and strangers' emotions through a screen. Then they wonder why they feel agitated, numb, impatient, scattered, or strangely empty. Because your nervous system was not built for non-stop input. Doom scrolling is not information. It is nervous system vandalism. And too many people are doing it daily. They wake up and let the world hit their face before their own mind has even stood up. News. Messages. Posts. Drama. Comparison. Then by noon, they feel emotionally unstable and call it a personality issue. No. That is overstimulation. That is unguarded exposure. That is poor discipline. A tired body creates a fragile mind. And a flooded mind creates reactive emotions. That's the key. If you want emotional mastery, you must stop treating your attention like a public sidewalk. Not everything gets access. Not every voice gets in. Not every headline deserves your nervous system. You do not need their permission to disconnect. You do not need their permission to go silent. You do not need their permission to protect your internal environment like it matters. Because it does matter. Your environment is not neutral. It trains you. Now think about burnout. This is where people often become dangerous to themselves. Not physically, mentally, spiritually, behaviorally. They start believing exhausted thoughts. That is a huge mistake. When people are burned out, they often say things like, "I don't care anymore, nothing means anything, maybe this path is wrong, maybe I'm not built for this." Maybe. But maybe not. Maybe your system is depleted and now everything looks darker than it is. Do not build life conclusions from nervous system collapse. That line matters. You do not make identity decisions from depletion. You recover first. Then you evaluate. Because many so-called identity crises are really biological distress with a story attached to them. You are not always having a spiritual revelation. Sometimes you need sleep, food, movement, and silence. That's the key. Now let's move to the practical levers. Posture, breath, pace, silence, environment. These are not small things. These are emotional controls. Start with posture. When people feel defeated, they collapse. Shoulders down. Head lowered. Chest closed. Movement small. And the body starts reinforcing the emotion. So change it. Stand up. Open the chest. Lift the head. Slow the hands. Stabilize the stance. You are sending a message to your nervous system. We are not under attack. It is not about appearance, it is about regulation. Then breath. In difficult moments, lengthen the exhale. Do not just breathe more. Breathe better. That is how you lower internal chaos without speaking a word. Then pace. Do not rush when you are emotionally activated. Slow your walking. Slow your speech. Slow your hands. Reactive people move fast. Regulated people choose their speed. That's the key. Then silence. Not empty time filled with scrolling. Real silence. No input. No stimulation. No commentary. No voices. Your nervous system needs intervals where it is not being pulled in 10 directions. Without silence, the body never resets. And a body that never resets will always overreact. Then environment. Clean your space. Reduce noise. Lower digital clutter. Step outside. Get sunlight. Get air. Sit somewhere without chaos pressing on your senses. Your environment either amplifies your instability or supports your control. Choose better. You have a choice. Now here is your instruction. For the next 7 days, stop pretending emotional control is only mental. Build physical stability on purpose. Protect sleep like it is part of your character. Eat before you become irritable and impulsive. Cut screen exposure before bed. Do not start your day with noise. Use breath before big conversations. Use posture when insecurity rises. Use slower pace when anger appears. Use silence when your mind is flooded. And before you say, "I'm in a bad place," ask yourself a harder question. Am I truly in a bad place? Or am I under-recovered? That question will save you from a lot of false conclusions. A tired body creates a fragile mind. Calm is trained in the body before it is proven in the mind. Repeat both. Live both. Because emotional mastery is not just about what you think when the feeling comes. It is about how well your system is prepared to carry pressure without collapsing into reaction. That is real discipline. Not dramatic speeches. Not endless analysis. Preparation. Regulation. Recovery. Command. You do not rise above your physical neglect. You pay for it emotionally. And once you understand that, you stop romanticizing chaos and start building a body that can support a stronger mind. You have learned to stop worshiping feelings. You learned to name them. You learned to delay reaction. Now you understand that your body either strengthens your control or sabotages it. But even with a strong body, one weakness can still ruin your peace: ego. Because many emotional wounds are not wounds at all. They are pride reacting to discomfort. Chapter 5. Refuse to be offended by everything. One of the fastest ways to lose emotional control is to make everything personal. That is how fragile people live. Everything is about them. Every delay means disrespect. Every disagreement means attack. Every criticism means humiliation. Every unanswered message means rejection. Every blunt tone means war. And because they interpret everything through ego, they suffer constantly. Not because life is attacking them. Because their pride is translating everything as an attack. Not everything is an attack. That is the sentence this chapter is built on. Not everything is an attack. Say it again. Not everything is an attack. That's the key. A lot of what you call emotional pain is not caused by the event itself. It is caused by the meaning you assign to the event. And when your ego is fragile, your meanings become hostile, distorted, inflated, self-centered. Someone is short with you. You assume they do not respect you. Someone forgets to include you. You assume they are dismissing you. Someone does not respond immediately. You assume you are being ignored. Someone critiques your work. You assume they are trying to diminish you. Maybe. But maybe not. Maybe they are busy. Maybe they are tired. Maybe they are direct. Maybe they are distracted. Maybe they are flawed. Maybe they are not thinking about you nearly as much as your ego hopes they are. That's the truth. Fragile ego makes you the center of every negative interpretation. Emotional mastery removes you from that fantasy. You have a choice. You can personalize every inconvenience. Or you can interpret events with maturity. Those are not the same life. Let's make it practical. You are in a meeting. You share an idea. Nobody reacts much. The room moves on. Instantly, your emotion kicks up. You feel overlooked, invisible, irritated, slightly embarrassed. Your mind starts talking. They do not value me. They never listen to me. I should stop speaking. Maybe I do not belong here. Slow down. Not everything is an attack. Maybe your timing was off. Maybe the room was distracted. Maybe the point needed more clarity. Maybe the group is moving fast. Maybe your idea was heard, just not acknowledged the way your ego wanted. Do you see the difference? The undisciplined person takes the moment personally. The disciplined person studies the moment accurately. That's the key. It is not about sensitivity. It is about discipline. You do not need their permission to stay composed. You do not need their permission to keep contributing. You do not need applause every time you speak in order to remain solid. That is self-respect. Now think about delayed replies. This is where weak emotional habits expose themselves instantly. A message goes out. No answer. An hour passes. Then 3. Then 12. Then a day. And suddenly the mind starts building poison. They are avoiding me. They do not care. They are disrespecting me. I knew it. No. What you knew is that your ego hates uncertainty. That is what you knew. And instead of tolerating uncertainty like an adult, you turn silence into a personal insult. Not everything is an attack. People have jobs. People have stress. People forget. People get overwhelmed. People are inconsistent. And yes, sometimes people are rude. But even then, your power is not in spiraling. Your power is in remaining clear. You have a choice. You can obsess over what their silence means. Or you can stay focused on your own standards. That is emotional mastery. Now let's talk about criticism. This is where ego becomes expensive. Someone criticizes your work online. A stranger. A coworker. A client. A boss. Maybe the feedback is harsh. Maybe the tone is blunt. Maybe it is unfair. Maybe part of it is true. What happens next reveals your level. If your ego is weak, you collapse or explode. You overdefend. You argue every point. You obsess over the comment for days. You start creating your life around proving them wrong. That is not strength. That is captivity. The moment another person can hijack your focus through criticism, they own more of your emotional life than they deserve. Protect your mission more than your pride. That sentence matters. Protect your mission more than your pride. Because mission asks, what matters here? Pride asks, how do I look? Mission asks, what can I learn? Pride asks, how dare they? Mission asks, what is useful? Pride asks, how do I win this moment? Do you see the difference? One builds your future. The other feeds your ego. And ego is never satisfied. That's the key. Strength is not proving people wrong in every moment. Strength is staying aligned with what matters. If the criticism is false, stay steady. If the criticism is partly true, improve. If the criticism is malicious, move on. But do not surrender your day, your peace, or your mission to every opinion that collides with your ego. That is weakness disguised as self-protection. Now think about blunt feedback from a boss. A lot of people cannot handle direct correction because they are addicted to emotional cushioning. They want truth wrapped in softness. They want accountability without discomfort. They want correction without sting. Life does not work that way. Sometimes the feedback is sharp. Sometimes it is delivered badly. Sometimes it bruises. But bruised pride is not the same as being attacked. Not everything is an attack. Maybe your boss said, "This was sloppy. Fix it." Your ego hears, "You are incompetent." But that may not be what happened. Maybe the work was sloppy. Maybe the instruction was simple. Maybe the correction was needed. And if you cannot separate feedback from identity, you will stay fragile forever. That's the key. A mature person hears correction and asks, "What is useful here?" An immature person hears correction and asks, "How do I emotionally survive being challenged?" Those are different people. Be the first one. Now let's go deeper. Offense often feels righteous. That is why it is dangerous. It makes you feel justified, clean, morally superior. It tells you your reaction is proof of your standards. But often it is just proof of your ego. You were not wounded. You were contradicted. You were not attacked. You were inconvenienced. You were not disrespected. You were not centered. That is different. And if you do not learn that difference, you will waste enormous emotional energy defending yourself from things that were never real threats to begin with. It is not about offense. It is about interpretation. It is not about what happened. It is about the meaning you assigned. That's the key. Here is the discipline. When you feel offended, do not react first. Ask one hard question. What exactly am I making this mean? That question will expose everything. Am I making this mean I am unimportant? Am I making this mean I am being rejected? Am I making this mean I am losing status? Am I making this mean I look foolish? Good. Now you are in truth. Now you can work. Because once the meaning is visible, you can challenge it. Maybe the meaning is false. Maybe it is exaggerated. Maybe it is ego protecting an image. And maybe the event was small until your pride inflated it into suffering. You have a choice. Pause. Interpret more carefully. Respond with proportion. That is emotional strength. And here is your behavioral instruction for this chapter. For the next 7 days, stop assuming hostile intent. When someone is late, do not build a story. When someone is quiet, do not build a story. When someone is blunt, do not build a story. When someone disagrees, do not build a story. Replace the first interpretation with a disciplined question. Is this actually an attack, or is my ego reacting? Ask it every time. Then ask another. What matters more here, my pride or my mission? That question will save your energy. Protect your mission more than your pride. If the mission is peace, do not argue to protect image. If the mission is growth, do not resist correction. If the mission is leadership, do not personalize friction. If the mission is love, do not escalate every bruise to the ego. This is how strong people move through the world. Not numb, not passive, not weak, just disciplined. They do not volunteer their peace to every inconvenience. They do not hand their mood to every delay. They do not turn every social bruise into an emotional emergency. They stay focused. They stay clear. They stay useful. Not everything is an attack. Protect your mission more than your pride. Those 2 lines will harden your mind in the right way. Because emotional mastery is not just controlling what you feel. It is refusing to let ego turn ordinary life into unnecessary suffering. When you stop personalizing everything, you stop bleeding energy into things that do not deserve it. And that gives you more strength for the things that do. You have learned not to worship feelings. You learned to name them. You learned to delay reaction. You learned to train the body. You learned to stop taking everything personally. Now it is time to transform pain itself. Because your deepest wounds can either become your excuse or your instruction. Chapter 6. Use pain as instruction, not identity. Pain will visit every life. That is not the question. The question is what you do when it arrives. Do you study it, or do you become it? That's the key. Most people do not just feel pain. They build a home inside it. They take one failure, one rejection, one betrayal, one humiliation, and they turn it into a permanent self-description. They stop saying, "That hurt me." They start saying, "This is who I am." That is where suffering becomes destructive. Not when pain enters. When identity fuses with pain. You went through it. You do not have to become it. Read that again. You went through it. You do not have to become it. Pain is information. That is the discipline of this chapter. Pain is information. Not a life sentence. Not a personality. Not a brand. Information. When something hurts, it is telling you something. About your expectations. Your blind spots. Your standards. Your attachments. Your preparation. Your self-respect. Your environment. Your choices. But if all you do is dramatize the pain, you never extract the lesson. And if you never extract the lesson, then the pain was wasted. That's the truth. Weak people ask, "Why is this happening to me?" Disciplined people ask, "What is this teaching me?" You have a choice. Every time. You can turn pain into wisdom. Or you can turn pain into identity. Those are very different futures. Let's make it real. You lose a job. Maybe it was unfair. Maybe the company cut people. Maybe you got outperformed. Maybe you got comfortable. Maybe you missed signs you should have seen. Whatever the reason, it hurts. Of course it hurts. The income is gone. The structure is gone. The status is shaken. The ego is bruised. But the job loss itself is not the final damage. The final damage comes if you turn the event into a definition. I got fired, so I must be a failure. Wrong. That company let me go, so I must not have value. Wrong. This happened once, so my future is broken. Wrong again. Pain is information. Maybe the information is that you relied too heavily on one source of security. Maybe the information is that your skills need to sharpen. Maybe the information is that you ignored misalignment for too long. Maybe the information is that your discipline slipped. Good. Now you have something useful. Now the pain can serve you. Because if pain does not teach you, it will repeat itself. That's the key. Now think about rejection in dating. This is where people become emotionally reckless. Someone does not choose them. Someone pulls away. Someone stops replying. Someone says no. And suddenly the mind starts writing lies. I'm not enough. I'm always the one who gets left. No one will ever want me. That is what undisciplined pain sounds like. One rejection becomes a whole identity. One person's decision becomes a global statement about your worth. That is emotional laziness. And it is dangerous. Because now you are not just hurting. You are building a worldview around hurt. You have a choice. You can let rejection reduce you. Or you can let rejection refine you. That's the key. Pain is information. Maybe the information is that you ignored red flags because you wanted validation. Maybe the information is that you were performing instead of being honest. Maybe the information is that you chose chemistry over character. Maybe the information is that you need stronger standards, not lower self-worth. Do you see the shift? The pain is still real, but now it is useful. And useful pain heals differently than meaningless pain. You went through it. You do not have to become it. Now let's talk about failure. A business launch fails. A project flops. An audience does not respond. The product does not sell. The video underperforms. The plan falls apart. Again, it hurts. Again, that is normal. But failure is one of the greatest instructors in life if your ego does not interrupt the lesson. Most people want failure to say nothing about them, or everything about them. Both are immature. Failure says something specific. Not everything. Specific. Maybe your timing was wrong. Maybe your offer was weak. Maybe your execution was sloppy. Maybe your patience was thin. Maybe you quit too early. Maybe you ignored the market and fell in love with your own idea. Good. Now we are learning. It is not about shame. It is about standards. That's the key. A failed launch is not proof that you are not built for success. It is proof that one attempt did not work. That is all. Do not turn events into identity. Do not turn outcomes into self-worth. Do not turn temporary pain into permanent language. That is where people destroy themselves. They do not fail and recover. They fail and then announce an identity around it. I'm not cut out for this. I'm just not that kind of person. I always mess things up. No. Those are not conclusions. Those are emotional surrender statements. And surrender disguised as self-awareness is still surrender. Pain is information. Use it. Study it. Let it correct you. But do not let it name you. Now consider public embarrassment. You say the wrong thing in a room. You stumble in a presentation. You misread the situation. You get corrected in front of others. Your face gets hot. Your stomach drops. The mind screams, "You will never recover from this." Calm down. You will recover. The question is whether you recover wiser or more fragile. That's the key. Public embarrassment can either harden your discipline or soften your character. It depends on what you do next. Weak people obsess over how foolish they looked. Strong people extract the lesson. Did you prepare poorly? Did you rush? Did you speak too soon? Did you pretend to know what you did not know? Fine. Correct it. Train it. Tighten up. But do not turn one embarrassing moment into a lifetime of self-consciousness. You went through it. You do not have to become it. This matters because many adults are still obeying pain from years ago. Not because the pain is still happening. Because they built a personality around it. Someone betrayed them, so now they perform coldness as identity. Someone rejected them, so now they perform detachment as identity. Someone humiliated them, so now they perform cynicism as identity. Someone disappointed them, so now they perform distrust as identity. They call this wisdom. Often it is just unprocessed pain wearing a costume. That is the truth. Suffering becomes destructive when you start organizing your entire personality around what hurt you. You are no longer learning from pain. You are recruiting pain into your sense of self. And once that happens, you protect the wound instead of healing it. You defend the wound. You perform the wound. You live from the wound. That is no way to live. You have a choice. Feel the pain fully. Study it honestly. But do not crown it. Do not build your name around it. You do not need their permission to heal. You do not need the apology to become wiser. You do not need the perfect ending to extract the lesson. You do not need everyone to understand your pain in order to stop living inside it. That's the key. Now here is the behavioral instruction for this chapter. The next time pain hits, do not ask, "Why me?" Ask, "What is this teaching me?" Then write 3 answers, not 10. 3. What is this teaching me about my standards? What is this teaching me about my blind spots? What is this teaching me about what must change? Do that after rejection. Do that after failure. Do that after embarrassment. Do that after betrayal. Train your mind to extract information before it starts writing identity. Then say this out loud. This hurt me. It does not define me. Say it again. This hurt me. It does not define me. Because that is how you keep pain from spreading into every corner of your life. Pain is information. You went through it. You do not have to become it. Those 2 sentences can rebuild a human being. They can turn bitterness into wisdom. They can turn shame into clarity. They can turn loss into higher standards. That is emotional mastery. Not avoiding pain. Using it properly. Because pain handled poorly becomes drama, victimhood, and repetition. But pain handled correctly becomes discernment, resilience, and power. And the person who learns from pain without becoming identified with it becomes harder to break and harder to deceive. You have learned to stop worshiping feelings. You learned to name them, delay them, regulate the body, refuse offense, transform pain into instruction. Now it is time to confront the hidden engine that multiplies emotional suffering after the event is over. The story you keep telling yourself. Chapter 7. Kill the habit of emotional storytelling. Most people are not destroyed by the event. They are destroyed by the story they attach to the event. That is the truth. Something happens. Small or medium. Sometimes painful. Sometimes awkward. Sometimes inconvenient. And before reality has even settled, the mind starts narrating. This always happens. Nobody respects me. I'll never recover from this. I ruin everything. And just like that, one moment becomes a whole identity. One trigger becomes a whole worldview. One mistake becomes a life sentence. The story intensifies the feeling. That is the law of this chapter. The story intensifies the feeling. Not the event alone. The story. That's the key. A bad event may hurt once. A bad story makes it hurt again and again and again. That is why emotional mastery is not only about what happens to you. It is about what you say to yourself about what happens to you. Because your words are not neutral. Your interpretations are not harmless. They train your nervous system. They shape your behavior. They either shrink you or steady you. You have a choice. You can tell a story that makes you weaker. Or you can tell the truth in a way that keeps you functional. Those are not the same thing. Let's make it practical. You have one awkward conversation. Maybe you say the wrong thing. Maybe the other person seems distant. Maybe you leave the interaction feeling slightly embarrassed. That is the event. But then comes the story. I'm socially broken. I'm bad with people. I always make things weird. Everyone can tell I'm awkward. No. That is not observation. That is dramatization. That is emotional storytelling. And the story intensifies the feeling. Now the original discomfort, which might have passed in an hour, turns into days of self-consciousness. Now you act strange in the next conversation because you are carrying the previous story into the present moment. Now the story starts creating the outcome it first only described. Do you see the trap? One awkward moment becomes a social identity. One event becomes a personality. That is how helplessness is manufactured. Not by facts, By narrative. Facts first. Story second. Control restored. Say that again. Facts first. Story second. Control restored. That is the discipline. The fact is, one conversation felt awkward. The story is, I am socially broken. Those are not the same thing. And if you cannot separate them, your emotions will keep escalating beyond what reality requires. Now think about money. A financial setback happens. An investment goes wrong. A client disappears. A deal falls through. You make a mistake. The numbers tighten. Pressure rises. That is real. But then the story begins. I'm a failure. I'll never get ahead. I always ruin opportunities. I'm just not built for success. Again, no. The event is financial. The story is identity. And identity stories are dangerous when they are written inside emotional pain. That's the key. One setback does not mean your life is collapsing. One mistake does not mean you are doomed. One bad month does not mean you are fundamentally incapable. But if you keep telling that story, your behavior will start matching it. You stop trying. You start hiding. You become passive. You get sloppy. You avoid decisions. Then the story gets stronger because now your actions are serving it. This is how people bury themselves. Not under the event. Under the language they use after the event. The story intensifies the feeling. Now think about one mistake. A missed detail. A bad judgment call. A forgotten responsibility. A failure to follow through. And immediately the mind says, I ruin everything. That is absurd. But people say it every day. One mistake becomes a total sentence. Always. Everything. Never. Nobody. These words are emotional gasoline. They make the feeling bigger than the facts. They turn a moment into a pattern whether the pattern exists or not. They create emotional fog. And once that fog fills the room, discipline disappears. That is why absolutist language is so dangerous. Always. Never. Everything. Nothing. Nobody. Everybody. These are the favorite words of emotional distortion. And if you keep using them, you will keep manufacturing helplessness. It is not about language. It is about discipline. That's the key. Disciplined people speak precisely, especially under pressure. Undisciplined people speak dramatically, especially under pressure. One creates clarity. The other creates chaos. And chaos feeds emotion. Now let's go deeper. Why do people tell dramatic stories? Because stories protect the ego. A clean fact often demands responsibility. A dramatic story often avoids it. The fact might be, I was unprepared. But the story says, nothing ever works out for me. The fact might be, I handled that badly. But the story says, I'm just a broken person. The fact might be, I need to improve my standards. But the story says, my life is cursed. Do you see what is happening? The story sounds emotional, but it is often evasive. It lets you feel overwhelmed instead of accountable. It lets you perform pain instead of examine truth. It lets you drown in generalization instead of dealing with specifics. That is why emotional storytelling feels natural but keeps you weak. You have a choice. You can dramatize. Or you can diagnose. That is emotional adulthood. Facts first. Story second. Control restored. Now here is the practical correction. When something happens, separate the event from the interpretation. Ask yourself, what are the bare facts? Not the mood. Not the fear. Not the assumption. The facts. Write them down if you need to. The conversation felt tense. Not, they hate me. The launch underperformed. Not, I'm a fraud. I made a mistake in front of others. Not, I ruin everything. That is how you cut emotion away from fiction. Then ask the next question, what story am I adding? This question is powerful because it exposes how often your suffering is being amplified by your own narration. Maybe the story is that you are not enough. Maybe the story is that nobody respects you. Maybe the story is that one hard moment means permanent failure. Fine. Now you can challenge it. Now you can refuse it. Now you can return to proportion. Because proportion is power. That's the key. A disciplined mind does not deny pain. It sizes it correctly. One mistake is one mistake. One rejection is one rejection. One setback is one setback. You do not need their permission to stop exaggerating. You do not need their permission to return to facts. You do not need their permission to refuse the inner drama that keeps you emotionally weak. You need honesty. And you need repetition. Because this habit is old in many people. They have been narrating themselves into suffering for years. They call it self-awareness. Often it is just emotional fiction with familiar language. So here is your instruction for this chapter. For the next 7 days, catch every absolute statement you make in moments of stress. Every, always. Every, never. Every, everything. Every, nothing. Every, nobody. Every, I'll never recover. Every, I ruin everything. Catch it. Then replace it with a factual sentence. Not, I always mess up. Say, I made a mistake in this situation. Not, nobody respects me. Say, I felt dismissed in that moment. Not, I'm a failure. Say, this outcome did not work. Do you feel the difference? One sentence traps you. The other informs you. One floods the mind. The other steadies it. One weakens identity. The other protects it. Facts first. Story second. Control restored. That phrase should become automatic. When emotion rises, return to facts. When drama rises, return to facts. When shame rises, return to facts. When fear starts predicting the future, return to facts. That is not coldness. That is discipline. That is how you keep your inner world from becoming a theater of exaggeration. Because every dramatic story you repeat becomes easier to believe. And every belief you repeat becomes easier to act from. So if you keep telling stories of helplessness, fragility, rejection, and doom, your behavior will start obeying them. But if you return to facts, your control returns with them. The story intensifies the feeling. Facts first. Story second. Control restored. That is the lesson. The event may be painful, but the story is optional. And once you stop narrating yourself into emotional chaos, you become harder to shake, harder to manipulate, and far more capable of responding to life with proportion instead of panic. You stopped worshipping feelings. You named them, delayed them, regulated your body, refused needless offense, turned pain into instruction, killed emotional storytelling. Now it is time to build emotional strength before the day has a chance to weaken it. Because if you lose the first hour, you often lose the inner war. Chapter 8. Master the morning, command the day. Most people lose the day before the day even begins. That is the truth. They wake up and instantly surrender their mind. Not to purpose. Not to discipline. Not to intention. To noise. To speed. To other people's priorities. To random inputs. To digital chaos. Then they wonder why they feel scattered by noon. Because they were conquered before breakfast. Win the first hour, win the inner war. That is the law of this chapter. Win the first hour, win the inner war. That's the key. Emotional strength is not built in the middle of crisis alone. It is built in routine, in preparation, in the first decisions of the day, in the way you enter consciousness each morning. Because the first hour sets the tone for your nervous system, your attention, your emotional posture, and your standard. If you begin the day in chaos, you will spend the rest of the day easier to destabilize. If you begin the day passive, you will spend the rest of the day reactive. If you begin the day absorbing the world, you will struggle to command yourself. You have a choice. You can enter the day as a leader, or you can enter it as a receiver. Those are not the same lives. And most people are living as receivers. A notification wakes them up. A text changes their mood. An email hijacks their mind. A headline disturbs their nervous system. A stranger's success online triggers comparison before they have even stood up. That is weakness by routine. Not because they are bad people. Because they have no morning discipline. That's the key. An unguarded morning creates an undisciplined mind. And an undisciplined mind becomes emotionally vulnerable all day long. Let's make it real. You wake up. Before your feet even touch the ground, you grab the phone. Messages, news, social media, metrics, other people talking, other people winning, other people complaining, other people performing, other people demanding. And now your mind is no longer yours. Now comparison enters. Now urgency enters. Now inadequacy enters. Now agitation enters. And the day has not even started. This is how people destroy their emotional baseline. Not with one catastrophe. With daily surrender. Before the world speaks to you, speak to yourself. That sentence should govern your mornings. Before the world speaks to you, speak to yourself. Because if you do not define your state early, the world will do it for you. And the world is careless with your peace. Now think about comparison before breakfast. This is one of the dumbest modern habits. People wake up and immediately expose themselves to curated images of success, beauty, wealth, productivity, status, and performance. Then they wonder why they feel smaller, slower, behind, or strangely dissatisfied with their own life. Because you started the day measuring instead of grounding. You started the day consuming instead of commanding. You started the day looking outward instead of getting centered inward. That is not about social media. It is about self-governance. It is not about technology. It is about discipline. That's the key. You do not need their permission to protect your morning. You do not need their permission to delay access. You do not need their permission to refuse entry to noise before your mind is stable enough to handle it. That is wisdom. Now think about rushing. So many people wake up late, move fast, skip stillness, skip breath, skip thought, skip intention, and run straight into work already emotionally compromised. Their body is rushed. Their mind is rushed. Their speech is rushed. Their judgment is rushed. Then one inconvenience happens and they explode inside. Why? Because they were already unstable. The rush did not create the weakness. It exposed it. Win the first hour, win the inner war. Because the first hour is where you either stabilize your inner state or scatter it. And scattered people are easier to upset. Now let's go deeper. A strong morning is not about performance theater. It is not about pretending to be elite. It is not about posting routines online. It is about one thing, entering the day in command of yourself. That command is built through ritual. Simple ritual. Not complicated. Not dramatic. Repeatable. Silence. Breath. Movement. Intention. Deliberate self-instruction. That is the framework. Silence first. Not endless stimulation. Not instant conversation. Not random content. Silence. Because the mind needs a clear threshold between sleep and exposure. It needs a few minutes where nothing is coming at it. No demands. No urgency. No performance. Just space. Silence is where you hear yourself again. And if you cannot hear yourself, you cannot lead yourself. That's the key. Then breath. Before you enter activity, regulate the body. Slow inhale. Longer exhale. Again. And again. This tells the nervous system that the day will not begin in panic. It creates internal order before external pressure arrives. It does not take long, but it changes everything. Then movement. Walk. Stretch. Stand up straight. Open the body. Wake the system with intention instead of jolting it with stress. A stagnant body invites a stagnant state. A moving body helps move emotional residue out of the system. Calm is not just thought. Calm is chemistry. Movement helps reset it. Then intention. Do not start the day without deciding who you are going to be. This is where most people fail. They wake up with tasks, but no inner direction. They know what they have to do, but not how they will do it. So the day's events decide that for them. No. You decide. Today I will be steady. Today I will not rush. Today I will speak clearly. Today I will not let small things own my mood. Today I will protect my focus. This matters, because intention gives the mind a target. And a mind with a target is harder to hijack. Then deliberate self-instruction. Speak to yourself with command. Not vague positivity. Not soft comfort. Instruction. I do not need to be rushed by the day. I will not hand my emotions to noise. I will solve what is in front of me. I will keep my state. I have a choice. That is how you train identity in the morning. Before the world speaks to you, speak to yourself. That is the habit. Now here is the deeper point. Morning discipline is not about having a perfect day. It is about building a stronger starting position. That's the key. You may still face stress. You may still face conflict. You may still face pressure, delay, difficulty, and bad news. But if you started the day centered, you meet those things with more stability, more proportion, more command. If you started the day scattered, every challenge lands harder. Because weak mornings create reactive afternoons. And reactive afternoons create regret. You have a choice. You can keep waking up in surrender. Or you can begin building emotional strength on purpose. Now here is your behavioral instruction for this chapter. For the next 7 days, guard the first hour. No social media in the first hour. No random scrolling in the first hour. No giving strangers control of your nervous system before you have centered yourself. Instead, build this sequence. First 5 minutes, silence. Next 2 minutes, breath. Next 10 minutes, movement. Next 3 minutes, intention. Next 2 minutes, deliberate self-instruction. That is enough. You do not need a 3-hour ritual. You need a repeatable one. You do not need their permission to build it. You do not need ideal conditions to start. You need discipline. And if you miss a day, do not dramatize it. Return the next morning. This is not about perfection. It is about standard. Win the first hour, win the inner war. Before the world speaks to you, speak to yourself. Repeat those lines until they become part of your nervous system. Because emotional mastery is not built only in the moments when life attacks. It is built in the hours when life has not yet touched you and you still choose to prepare. That is how you stop living reactively. That is how you stop starting every day from behind. That is how you command your inner world before the outer world starts making demands. You have learned to stop worshiping feelings, name them, delay them, regulate your body, refuse needless offense, use pain as instruction, kill destructive stories, and now command the beginning of your day. But strength is not proven in silence alone. It is proven under pressure. It is proven when the room is unstable and you are not. Chapter 9. Stay cold in chaos. Anyone can look disciplined when life is quiet. Anyone can sound wise when nothing is being tested. Anyone can speak about emotional mastery when the room is calm, the bills are paid, the relationship is stable, the feedback is positive, and the future feels predictable. That is not where your level is revealed. Your level is revealed in chaos, conflict, uncertainty, deadlines, pressure, betrayal, public tension, unexpected setbacks. That is where emotional control stops being theory and becomes identity. And here is the truth. The calm person is not the one who feels less. The calm person is the one who remains useful while feeling more. That's the key. Calm is a competitive advantage. Say it again. Calm is a competitive advantage. Because when pressure rises, most people become less useful. They think worse, speak worse, choose worse. They rush. They panic. They amplify problems. They spread instability. They become part of the emergency. Do not be that person. You have a choice. You can add noise, or you can add control. Those are not the same thing. And in every hard moment, people can feel the difference. Let's be clear. Staying cold in chaos does not mean you become numb. It does not mean you stop caring. It does not mean you feel nothing. It means you refuse to let pressure make you sloppy. It means you refuse to let fear make you dramatic. It means you refuse to let emotional intensity reduce your usefulness. That is strength. And strength under pressure changes everything. A calm leader stabilizes a team. A calm parent stabilizes a home. A calm athlete stabilizes performance. A calm creator stabilizes identity. Because panic is contagious. But so is composure. That is one of the most important truths in this entire audiobook. Panic is contagious. But so is composure. When others lose control, your control becomes visible. That is the standard. Now think about leadership. A company hits a setback. Revenue drops. A client leaves. A launch fails. The team gets tense. People start speculating. Energy shifts. Fear enters the room. What does a weak leader do? They mirror the fear. They become frantic. They speak too fast. They send mixed messages. They over-explain. They look uncertain. They spread their own panic through tone, body language, and decision-making. And now the problem is no longer just the setback. The problem is multiplied by unstable leadership. But a strong leader does something different. They do not deny the difficulty. They do not fake confidence. They do not pretend pressure is not real. They stay useful. They slow the room down. They name the problem clearly. They define the next move. They keep their voice steady. They reduce emotional fog. That's the key. Calm is not passivity. Calm is functional command. When others lose control, your control becomes visible. That is what people trust. Not perfection. Not speeches. Stability. Now think about parenting. A child is upset. The home is loud. Something goes wrong. Schedules fall apart. Emotions rise. Maybe multiple people are stressed at once. In those moments, many adults start matching the chaos instead of leading it. They raise their voice because the room is loud. They become sharp because everyone else is emotional. They speed up because pressure is building. And what happens? The house becomes one nervous system with no center. That is not leadership. That is emotional imitation. A strong parent does something else. They regulate first. They lower the voice instead of raising it. They simplify instead of dramatizing. They create order instead of adding intensity. Because children do not just listen to your words. They absorb your state. And the same is true in every environment. People absorb your state. That is why composure matters so much. It does not only affect you. It affects the whole room. Panic is contagious. But so is composure. Now think about sports. An athlete under pressure misses a shot. Makes a mistake. Hears the crowd shift. Feels the moment tighten. Weak athletes start negotiating with emotion. They become hesitant. They overthink. They rush the next move. They play scared. Why? Because they are not just dealing with the play. They are reacting to the pressure around the play. But elite performers return to function fast. They breathe. They reset posture. They narrow focus. They stay in the next action. That's the key. Chaos reveals training. It does not create it. Read that again. Chaos reveals training. It does not create it. Pressure does not suddenly turn you into someone new. It exposes what you have rehearsed. If you have rehearsed panic, panic will appear. If you have rehearsed blame, blame will appear. If you have rehearsed composure, composure will appear. So do not wait for chaos to decide who you are. Train before it arrives. Now think about creators, entrepreneurs, and public criticism. You put your work into the world. A post, a product, a performance, a message. And then criticism comes. Misunderstanding comes. Public tension comes. Maybe people mock. Maybe they distort. Maybe they attack. In that moment, everything in the undisciplined person wants to react. Defend. Explain. Attack back. Spiral. Delete. Retreat. Collapse. But the emotionally trained person asks a different question. What keeps me useful here? That is the question that matters. Not, how do I make this pain stop immediately? Not, how do I protect my ego? What keeps me useful? Maybe the answer is silence. Maybe the answer is one measured response. Maybe the answer is no response at all. Maybe the answer is adjusting the work and moving forward. That is emotional command. Calm is a competitive advantage. Because while others burn energy proving, defending, spiraling, and collapsing, the calm person stays focused enough to keep building. And builders win longer than reactors. That's the key. Now let's get more precise. What does it actually mean to stay cold in chaos? It means you shorten your words under pressure. It means you slow your body under pressure. It means you breathe before you decide. It means you solve the next problem, not all the imaginary ones. It means you stop asking, how bad could this get? And start asking, what is the next useful move? That question matters. What is the next useful move? Not the next emotional move. The next useful move. Because usefulness is the standard in pressure. Anyone can feel overwhelmed. Anyone can panic. Anyone can predict disaster. That takes no mastery. The disciplined person remains operational. That is rare. That is valuable. That is power. You have a choice. When chaos rises, you can let your emotions become the loudest thing in the room. Or you can let your discipline become the strongest thing in the room. Those are different identities. And people notice. Your team notices. Your partner notices. Your children notice. Your audience notices. Your opponents notice. Life notices. When others lose control, your control becomes visible. Now here is the trap you must avoid. Do not confuse emotional intensity with importance. Just because everyone is loud does not mean loudness is useful. Just because the moment is urgent does not mean speed is wise. Just because fear is present does not mean collapse is appropriate. It is not about pressure. It is about discipline. That's the key. The pressure will come. The deadline will come. The criticism will come. The betrayal may come. The emergency may come. The room may shake. But your job is not to stop reality from becoming intense. Your job is to remain effective inside intensity. That is emotional mastery. And here is your behavioral instruction for this chapter. For the next 7 days, when pressure rises, reduce yourself to 3 steps. First, slow the body. Drop the shoulders. Unclench the jaw. Lengthen the exhale. Second, shrink the field. Do not deal with 10 problems mentally. Deal with the next useful move. Third, stabilize the room. Use fewer words. Clearer words. Calmer tone. Deliberate pace. Practice that at work. Practice that at home. Practice that in conflict. Practice that in traffic. Practice that when plans change. Because chaos does not care about your intentions. It reveals your conditioning. Train better. And remember this, staying cold is not about looking impressive. It is about remaining effective. It is about refusing to let pressure steal your judgment. It is about becoming the person others can lean on because your state does not collapse every time life gets loud. Calm is a competitive advantage. Panic is contagious, but so is composure. When others lose control, your control becomes visible. That is the lesson. And once you learn to stay useful in chaos, you become more than emotionally strong. You become dependable, trustworthy, dangerous in the best way. Because now pressure does not just test you. It reveals your command. You have learned to stop worshiping feelings, name them, delay reaction, train the body, refuse offense, use pain as instruction, kill emotional storytelling, master the morning, and stay cold in chaos. Now there is one final step. One final standard. Because emotional mastery is not complete until you stop being ruled by any passing state and become the one who decides. Chapter 10. Become the one who decides. This is where everything comes together. Not in theory. Not in inspiration. In identity. Because emotional mastery is not a trick. It is not a mood. It is not a temporary burst of motivation. It is not something you perform when life is easy and forget when life gets hard. It is self-government. It is the decision to become the authority over your own inner world. That's the key. Not the prisoner of your emotions. Not the servant of your moods. Not the victim of your impulses. The authority. The one who decides. I decide what rules me. That is the sentence this final chapter is built on. I decide what rules me. Say it again. I decide what rules me. Because until that sentence becomes real in your life, everything you learned in this audiobook remains incomplete. Useful, but incomplete. You can name the feeling, delay the reaction, regulate the body, reject the story, and still remain weak if you have not settled the deeper issue. Who is in charge? That is the real question. Who is in charge when anger rises? Who is in charge when fear shows up? Who is in charge when sadness enters? Who is in charge when comparison poisons the mind? Who is in charge when frustration tries to push you into recklessness? If the answer is emotion, then your life is still negotiable. If the answer is discipline, then you are finally becoming dangerous in the right way. You have a choice. Always. You can let passing states govern permanent behavior. Or you can become the one who decides. Those are not the same lives. And most people never make this shift because they are waiting to feel strong before they start acting strong. That is backwards. Strength is not something you wait for. Strength is something you choose into existence through repeated command. That's the key. It is not about feeling powerful. It is about becoming authoritative. Now let's revisit the full spectrum. Anger in conflict. You feel disrespected, misunderstood, provoked. The heat rises fast. The ego wants to strike. The old self wants to interrupt, dominate, punish, prove. But the new standard says something different. I decide what rules me. Not anger. Not pride. Not the urge to win the moment. You pause. You breathe. You choose words that solve instead of words that wound. Not because anger is gone. Because anger is no longer in charge. Emotion may enter. It does not take command. That line matters. Emotion may enter. It does not take command. Now fear before action. The meeting matters. The opportunity matters. The risk is real. Your body feels it. Your chest tightens. Your mind starts predicting embarrassment, rejection, failure. Good. Let it speak. But do not let it decide. That is emotional mastery. The weak mind says, I feel fear, so I should stop. The trained mind says, fear is here. Action still moves. That's the key. You do not need their permission to move while afraid. You do not need guaranteed success to begin. You do not need emotional comfort to act with courage. You need command. I decide what rules me. Now sadness after loss. This is where people become confused. They think emotional mastery means hardness, detachment, sterility. But no. Mastery does not mean you stop feeling sorrow. It means sorrow does not become your ruler. You grieve. You feel. You honor what mattered. But you do not collapse your whole identity into the loss. You do not make sadness the final narrator of your life. You do not turn pain into permanent permission to abandon yourself. That's the key. Feeling deeply is allowed. Living under emotional dictatorship is not. Emotion may enter. It does not take command. Now insecurity under comparison. You see someone ahead of you. Better positioned. More praised. More polished. More advanced. The old pattern starts again. Shrinking. Doubting. Performing. Seeking permission. Stop. You do not need their permission to stay solid in your own lane. You do not need their permission to keep building. You do not need their permission to exist without comparison eating your confidence. That is adulthood. Comparison may enter. It does not take command. I decide what rules me. Now frustration under delay. This is where many people expose how emotionally immature they still are. Something takes longer than they wanted. Results are slow. People are inefficient. Traffic builds. Progress drags. Plans change. And suddenly they act as if inconvenience is injustice. No. Delay is part of life. Friction is part of life. Waiting is part of life. The question is not whether frustration will appear. The question is whether frustration gets to run your mouth, your behavior, your standards, and your day. You have a choice. You can let delay turn you childish. Or you can let delay deepen your discipline. That's the key. It is not about impatience. It is about command. I decide what rules me. This is the identity shift. No longer asking, what do I feel like doing? Now asking, what does my standard require? No longer asking, what emotion is strongest? Now asking, what action is right? No longer asking, how do I escape discomfort? Now asking, how do I remain in command inside discomfort? That is self-government. That is the final form of emotional mastery. Attention, interpretation, action, repetition. These are your 4 territories. And if you do not govern them, emotion will. Attention is where you place your mind. Interpretation is the meaning you assign. Action is what you do next. Repetition is what becomes identity. That is why mastery is not one decision. It is many, repeated, daily, quietly, without applause. You decide what gets your focus. You decide what a moment means. You decide what behavior follows. You decide what pattern gets repeated. I decide what rules me. That is the standard. And once that sentence becomes real, life changes. Because now anger is not your king. Fear is not your king. Sadness is not your king. Approval is not your king. Impulse is not your king. Comfort is not your king. You are not against emotion. You are above emotional dictatorship. That's the key. The goal was never to eliminate feeling. The goal was to eliminate emotional rule. Many people spend their entire lives negotiating with weakness. They say, I know I should, but I don't feel like it. I know it matters, but I'm not in the mood. I know it's right, but I'm too upset. That is a soft life. That is a negotiable identity. And if you stay negotiable, every mood becomes a vote. Every impulse becomes a possibility. Every hard day becomes an excuse. No more. This chapter ends with a decision. A real one. You are no longer a reactor. You are no longer a victim of passing states. You are no longer available for emotional chaos to run your life. You are no longer negotiable with weakness. Read that again. You are no longer negotiable with weakness. Because weakness always wants a conversation. Maybe just this once. Maybe later. Maybe after you feel better. No. You have a standard now. Emotion may enter. It does not take command. I decide what rules me. Those are not just phrases. They are identity statements. They are the lines that separate a reactive person from a disciplined one. So here is your instruction. For the next 30 days, when emotion rises, do not ask what it wants. Ask what your standard requires. When anger rises, ask, what does command look like here? When fear rises, ask, what action still matters? When sadness rises, ask, how do I honor this without surrendering to it? When insecurity rises, ask, what remains true about me even now? When frustration rises, ask, will I let inconvenience lower my level? Use those questions. Repeat those questions. Build your identity through those questions. Because self-government is not declared once. It is installed through repetition. I decide what rules me. Emotion may enter. It does not take command. That is the final lesson of this audiobook. Not that you will never feel. You will. Not that life will never shake you. It will. Not that pressure, pain, fear, or frustration will disappear. They will not. But they are no longer the authority. You are. And once you become the one who decides, everything changes. Your confidence changes because it is no longer built on mood. Your clarity changes because it is no longer distorted by every feeling. Your actions change because they are no longer negotiable. And your life changes because your emotions no longer drive it blindly. This is emotional mastery. This is command. This is self-respect in action. And this is where the real work begins. Not in listening. In living it. Not in agreeing. In practicing it. Not in admiring the standard. In becoming it. Now you do not need another theory. You need a decision. Make it. I decide what rules me. Emotion may enter. It does not take command. This is the lesson. Your life changes the moment your emotions stop being your orders and start being your data. You are allowed to feel anger, but not obey it blindly. You are allowed to feel fear, but not surrender to it. You are allowed to feel pain, pressure, doubt, and disappointment, but you are not allowed to hand them the steering wheel. Emotional mastery is the discipline of pausing, naming, choosing, and acting with authority. It is training your body, guarding your mind, rejecting dramatic stories, and refusing to let temporary feelings create permanent damage. This is how confidence is built. This is how clarity is built. This is how self-respect is built. So here is your challenge. For the next 7 days, do not let a single emotion make a decision for you. Feel everything. Obey nothing blindly. Watch yourself. Correct yourself. Command yourself. And prove that your mind belongs to you.